the format of the meeting. I'm going to make some opening remarks, introduce the staff, talk a little bit about why we're here, a little bit about the ground rules of a meeting like this and how we usually like to conduct them, talk to you about the results of the audit that we've just done, and then open it up for a few questions from all of you if you have any questions about what I have to say. I'm here with Spence Jackson, who's in charge of the meeting. If there's any members of the press here who want to talk to me afterwards, you can talk to Spence. But the people who actually did the audit are Chris Vetter here, a CPA from our office, and David Olson. Where are you, David? He's in the back. He's got additional copies of the audit. They're two of the finest auditors we have in our office, so we have really good people doing the work here. What I'm going to do, first of all, is talk a little bit about why I'm here. I'm here because the citizens of Pevely, Missouri petitioned me to be here. Under the laws of the state of Missouri, if a certain number of people provide a petition to the auditor's office, we by law have to come in and do an audit. In this case, you needed to provide a petition that encompassed 15% of the people that voted in the last governor's election. And by our calculation, you needed 302 signatures to get us to come in and audit, and you provided 401 valid signatures. Once those signatures are in, that triggers the audit. We come in and we do the audit. We audited the fiscal year ending December 2012, but we always look at things before and after just to make sure that everything's in context. We tend to focus on 1 year, but we will look ahead and we will look behind if there's a continuing problem of any kind. We spent over 1,160 hours doing this audit, so we spent a lot of time, and that's because there were a lot of things to look at. Some audits we have are more complicated, some are less, but there were a significant number of issues that required our attention. So we spent over 1,000 hours looking at the books and records of the city, and we're here to report to you on the results of that activity. Now, my audit findings are intended to be constructive. It's always very important to say this in a petition situation. In one respect, a petition is the most important audit we do because the citizens took the time. It's democracy in action. They took the time to ask their government to come in and do something for them. So it's a very, very important audit. But often, when there's a petition, it's because some people are really mad at each other. Let's be frank about it. They don't like what's going on. They're unhappy. And it's very important to me that this meeting remain constructive and productive. I'm not here to settle any scores. I'm not here to side with one group of people against another group of people. The only purpose for having the state auditor here tonight is to tell you how your city's doing, what we found, what's right, what's wrong, and what needs to be fixed. And as long as the meeting stays in that context, I'll stay here as long as you want to answer your questions and discuss it with you. But let's try to be civil. Let's try to be controlled and calm and acknowledge that you live in a great community. I mean, this is the heart of Missouri here. And whatever I'm going to say tonight, and I found some pretty significant problems with what's going on in Pevely, but you still live in a great community. It's still a nice place to be. I don't live too far from here. You should be happy that you live here and you're part of this community. And I want you to think about it in that context. And what we're here to do today is try to improve that community. That's the only purpose why I'm here. Now, when I became auditor 4 years ago, I established something that had not been in the auditor's office before, and that was a rating system. I rate every entity that wants me to audit them: excellent, good, fair, or poor. And it's not just something we pull out of a hat. If you look on our website, www.auditor.mo.gov, you will see very specific criteria on how you get an excellent, how you get a good, how you get a fair, and how you get a poor. And when we give a low grade, it's not to say it's a bad place to live, it's to say that the books and records and the way the government is run needs improvement. In this case, I was disappointed that we gave it a poor rating. Pevely did receive a poor rating in terms of the way its government was functioning. That's the lowest rating on our scale, the very lowest. And that means there are significant problems that require immediate improvement. And you'll hear about them. Many of them you already know. They've already been exposed. They've already been talked about. Some of them you haven't heard before. And I will also tell you some of the things that people complain to us about our office turned out not to be a problem. Not everything people were worried about turned out to be a problem. Because we look at things totally objectively and we just try to report the facts. So I'm going to go through them now one by one. It's going to take a little while because there was a lot to talk about. And I'll be happy to talk to you about it or answer any questions. And if I can't, we'll have David or Chris answer the questions since they were really here doing the work day in and day out on this audit. Now, because the audit received my lowest rating, a poor rating, we will come back in 90 to 120 days and do a follow-up audit. Another thing I put in place when I became auditor was the audit follow-up team. I had a former prosecutor out of Greene County near Springfield, Missouri. Go way down Highway 44 for that. And he comes back 90 to 120 days later and makes sure that all the recommendations we said should be in place in Pevely are in place and that they've been fixed. So we don't just come here say here's what needs to be fixed and walk away. We come back to make sure improvements have occurred, and we will be back. Let me talk about the findings. You can follow through. I'm going to follow roughly in the order of the audit that you have in front of you. I'm going to follow that. First thing we looked at, we always look at first because that's really what auditors focus on, financial issues. We found a number of significant problems in the finances of the city of Pevely. First of all, we found the city inappropriately used restricted funds to finance general operations, did not enforce several taxes, and the board did not review and receive detailed financial information. Let me go through those one at a time. In April 2013, the city put $200,000 of the restricted water and sewer fund to finance general operations. Under state law, if money is for a particular fund, it may not be transferred to another fund. That's what happened here. The good news is, once we started the audit, they paid the money back. So it's not a current problem, it's a former problem. But it shows a very loose attention to state law when you're willing to move $200,000 from a fund that's not supposed to be into a general fund to cover the obligations. But that's already fixed, so that's the good news about it. But it is a warning in the future. You can't do that. It's against state law, and it's a problem. The good news is that's fixed now. We were concerned that it did not appear to us that the board of the city, and this is during the audit period, and by the way, we think that's just improved also over the last few months, did not receive detailed financial information that would assist in effectively monitoring cash balances. So one reason money had to be transferred around is because no one really knew where the money was or how much they needed. There was not a lot in the way of financial controls and information being provided to the board, not what we would normally expect to see in a city like this. And that has to be improved. They should receive every month how much revenue is being collected. What are your debt obligations every month? That should be reported on a monthly basis in any city, in any political subdivision. And that was not happening in this city, but it is happening now. We were very concerned about this neighborhood improvement district. You all know more about that than I do. There was a situation at the end of 2013 where your bond balance was $4.4 million, and there was $1.4 million in interest. That's a lot of debt. In fact, the city has a total of $10 million in debt. That's a problem, and it needs to be fixed. The city planned to be reimbursed from some special assessments to be paid by the builders and homeowners in the subdivision from water and sewer tap fees. That was the plan. But because of problems completing the project, the city may never receive those fees. And so these obligations are standing out there without a way to pay for it, and that's a serious problem. What ended up happening was there was a reserve account, $161,000 shortage ended up existing in that reserve account. Now you can sometimes use reserve money to pay bond obligations, but we don't think, and I won't bother with all the details, it's in the audit, we don't think those conditions existed here. So there was an inappropriate use of the reserve fund because some of those fees didn't come through. And that creates a significant problem. And another reason why the city has so much debt, I think this has already been reported publicly, is you weren't collecting taxes that you all had approved. So you had a situation where there was a road improvement tax passed all the way back in 1993, and over $250,000 was not collected. It would be in your treasury otherwise from that road improvement tax. The city was not collecting a sales tax to fund construction of City Hall. That was approved in 2006. $100,000 was not collected there. That should have been collected. That's one of the reasons you all have the debt that you do. Now, some of these tax collection issues were corrected in 2013, and that's good. The new administration is taking the action necessary to fix the problem. But a city like Pevely can't afford to be missing out on $350,000 worth of taxes that you all approved. And that's what creates debt, and that's what creates problems down the road. So we always have recommendations when we're finding. We don't just come in here and say, here's the problem. We'll say, here's what needs to be done to fix the problem. First, stop improper inter-fund transfers. The city has committed to stopping those improper inter-fund transfers, and we'll be back in a few months to make sure that that occurs. Have timely, detailed information on financial reports. Monitor the city's financial condition. You don't get this far in debt with people monitoring the store, with people minding the store. That needs to happen. The city has said they're committed to doing that, and will do that going forward. And then, of course, ensure all financial obligations can be met and all sources of revenue are being collected. I mean, if you all agree to a tax, it's hard to raise your taxes. We all work hard for a living. If you agree to raise your taxes, collect the tax. That way you don't have the debts. And the city is also fully committed to implementing that recommendation. Pretty serious problems, but I do believe your current administration is committed to fixing those problems. Finding number 2, budgets and financial statements. You can see it on your audit. Number 2, or number 2. The budgets do not contain all elements required by state law. Something called a budget message, which says what you're basically going to do, a budget summary, information on indebtedness, the beginning fund balances. When you're creating a budget, don't you need to know how much money you have first? Of course you do. and that wasn't being done. And one of the reasons I think why the city has had some financial trouble is basic budgeting. So not only were there not proper financial information being disseminated to the board, but at the beginning of every year, they weren't getting the baseline of where you were financially in order to determine how to spend your money. Very, very important. Our recommendations always follow from our findings, prepare budgets in compliance with state law, and the city has said they're going to implement it. The other problem we had is the city is required by law to submit an annual financial report to my office. And for 2012 and 2013, they either didn't come in at all or they came in very, very late. One thing we can do is find out if there's a problem, but we can't do it unless we get the data. So state law was violated by not providing the auditor's office with the appropriate financial information required by state law. Finding number 3, bidding and professional services. The city does not adequately document bidding decisions. City procedures are not sufficient, and the city does not periodically solicit proposals for some services. You have a policy in the city, a good policy. If you're going to buy something, now I'm talking about goods, we'll talk about services in a little bit. Some goods, and they're over $3,000, you have to have competition. Why do you have a policy like that? It's a very good policy. You have competition because with competition, you get the lowest price. It's simple as that. When more people are competing, they're going to know somebody else is competing, they're going to give you the lowest price. This is not rocket science. Well, it's for over $3,000. Your sewer pumps were $24,000. There was no competition. Street department pickup truck, $22,000, no competition. Playground equipment, $18,000, no competition. Another pickup truck, $13,000, no competition. Many examples of where this policy, which is very clean and clear in the ordinances, and good ordinances of the city, were not being followed. We also found that when you did some street paving, there was a $225,000 contract, but no one could show us any of the documentation for that. What was going on, what happened. We were able to get a lot of the information from the actual company that did the work, but the city didn't have it. The city is required to keep that information so people can look at it and so people can monitor the contract. That was $225,000, and there was almost no record keeping for it. Now, but as I said, we were able to go to the vendor and get almost all the information. There's still a little bit missing, but we were able to get most of it. Professional services. You have CPAs, you have attorneys, you've had some pretty big legal fees because of everything that's been going on. Now, I was a lawyer in private practice before I was honored enough to be elected your state auditor. And even though I might have won 20 cases for a client, I always had to compete for the next case because you know what? We'll lower the billing rates if there's competition. If we know another law firm wants that work, we'll lower the billing rates. In this case, your city policy requires expressions of interest from at least 5 firms and detailed proposals for at least 3 firms. It's going to be over $10,000. That was not happening here. So again, our recommendation always flows from the finding. It's very simple. Solicit bids for all contracts, goods or services that are over $3,000 or over $10,000 in accordance with city policy. All we're asking people to do is follow the city policies. The policies are fine, it's the implementation that's problematic. Then there's the cell phone. I've heard a lot about the cell phone. For more than 10 years, the city did not require the former mayor to submit detailed supporting documentation for a cell phone bill. Now, the amount of money, $12,000, compared to $10 million in debt and all that's relatively low. But it says something about a city when you're going to reimburse somebody for their phone without any appropriate documentation. The monthly payments increased from $61 per month to $138 per month. Some got up to $275 per month. The city made more than 12 payments in some years, and less than 12 payments in other years. But the most bizarre thing, and it really is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen since I've been auditor, is the former mayor submitted the same phone bill over and over again each month. So you had a phone bill from April 2009, and that was continued to be submitted every month at the same exact phone bill, and they kept paying it. It was for the April 2009 month. I don't know even what the reason for doing that would be unless somebody was trying to hide something. I don't know. But why would you submit the same bill? If the city's already authorized the payment of the bill, which is one question, whether that should happen, why would you keep submitting the same bill every month? Why are there whiteouts and notations and strange markings on it? It's not in the scheme of things, when you have $10 million in debt and you're talking about $12,000, it's not the most important issue, but it says something about the way the city was run, that you submit a bill for 2009, for April 2009, and submitted in May, the same one in June, the same one in July, and it would be paid. It shows a breakdown in financial control, and it shows a lack of oversight, and it creates suspicion. We don't know that there were any improper calls made. We don't have the actual bill. All we know is he kept submitting the same bill. And that's really, really, I mean, the only word I can use, if you'd see me give other public letters, I don't use this word around, just strange, very strange. And we expect things like that. Now, this thing was settled, and the city was out several $1,000s as a result of the settlement. 60 different bills had correction fluid covering the amount due and a handwritten note on top of it how much the city should pay. So you had a bill, the amount was whited out, and then the mayor wrote down what should be paid. I mean, under no definition of accounting should that have occurred, under no definition. So while it isn't a huge amount of money, it does represent what we believe to be a significant problem. In 2000, there's more, I'm not going to go through all of it, you can read more of it in the audit, but that isn't even the whole story on the phone bill. I won't go through all of it, you can read it. Let's talk about general accounting controls and procedures, because the cell phone bill relates to that. The city does not perform timely bank reconciliations. The city does not routinely follow up on outstanding checks that haven't been cashed or checks that are due. As of December 2013, the city had 35 checks for over $4,000 that had been outstanding for more than a year, and nobody was doing anything about it. The city clerk and 2 utility clerks were able to make adjustments to customer accounts without any independent review, meaning they had total control over the books. That's a problem. And there were some serious issues with the utility deposits also. The city requires utility deposits from customers, but doesn't reconcile utility deposits held in the bank account to the amount reported in the accounting record. What that means is, you have a checkbook, you have a bank statement. Every month, you look at the checkbook and make sure the bank statement matches. They weren't doing that, and there was a $20,000 discrepancy. If you had a $20,000 discrepancy in your bank book, you'd do some looking into it. And that did not happen here. Now, there were explanations given, but they weren't documented in the accounting. And so that was a significant problem. Capital assets. It's very important to keep track of inventory. That wasn't being done. In the old days, inventory was like this coding. You know, I mean, no one's going to steal a coding problem. Inventory is different these days. It can be cell phones. It can be video equipment. It can be things that can be easily stolen. So we think it's very, very important there be a very, very aggressive program of maintaining inventory lists and checking to make sure it's all there once a year. And that's what most cities do. And that's what we expect to be done here as well. In 2013, the main area we looked at, there was no inventory conducted for City Administration Office, Parks Department, Planning and Zoning Department, or Police. Fortunately, everybody's committed to doing that, so that's good news. Obviously, our recommendations are do bank reconciliations, establish processes for collecting on outstanding checks, and make sure all utility system adjustments are taken care of when there's a discrepancy between the two sets of books. Very important. And then finally, maintain good property records, make sure your stuff is all there and isn't being taken. When we did the audit of the city of Kansas City School District, a huge one, there was $2 million worth of inventory they couldn't find. Most of it stuff that would be easily stolen. Now they put in every piece of electronic equipment something to trace it. So if it's stolen, you can immediately go to who stole it. There should be things like that put in place. Employee compensation, commuting mileage benefits were not reported in accordance with the IRS requirements as income. That was a violation of federal law. There was no mileage log being used by people who have cars. I mean, don't you want to know if they're using it for personal purposes or official purposes? You're going to want to have a mileage log. We have no evidence anybody did anything wrong, but we don't know because there were no mileage logs. There was also perfect attendance payments being made. I have a mixed feeling about that. If somebody attends every day, I personally don't have a problem with giving them a little extra money, but unfortunately there's a state law against it. So my job as auditor is to say you can't give out perfect attendance bonuses because it's not legal in Missouri, and it was being done. That's not to say I'm against the spirit of what they were trying to do. Obviously, you know, I think it's great if people show up every day. And in the private sector, where I came from, you would be allowed to give an attendance bonus. But people here are supposed to know state law, and under state law, you're not allowed to do that. So we expect that to be fixed as well. Now, there were some other issues. The sunshine law. Under Missouri law, meetings are supposed to be open. They're going to be made closed, and there are some circumstances when you can have a closed meeting. You're going to talk about sensitive personnel issues or things like that. The state recognizes you won't have a frank discussion if everybody's sitting there watching, so that's fine. But in this case, the meeting minutes did not record the roll call vote to go into closed session for 11 out of the 21 closed sessions. And that's required by state law. As long as the processes are followed, And the subjects discovered are permissible under state law. You can't go into closed session. I'm not against secrecy in some cases because you couldn't function if everything was open. But number one, there's a presumption that meetings are open. There's a presumption that every one of you can attend every meeting. And if they're going to change that, they have to have a roll call vote, they have to explain why they're going to closed session, and they have to do that. We looked at 21 examples, and in 11 of those cases, it was not properly followed. So we need to make sure those procedures are followed so you can have confidence that when they do go into closed session, it's for a legitimate reason, and that makes perfect sense. You're not going to get to every meeting, but you're entitled to know why you're not allowed to participate in every part of every meeting, and that's what the problem was. Now, I know you all have some concerns about other issues. You might be thinking, why didn't he talk about that? I can assure you we did look into those other issues, and if there was anything wrong, it was so minor, it didn't end up being in the report, and you'd be confident those aren't serious problems, because we looked at it thoroughly and everything. I will tell you, I enjoy coming to meetings like this. I enjoy telling people how to improve their community. I don't take pleasure in pointing out problems. We have a great community. I think we've laid a roadmap for what needs to be done to improve it. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and it's an honor to serve you. Thank you for having me here tonight. Yes, in the back.
I was on the board at the time that we transferred the $200,000 from water and sewer, and we were assured by our former city attorney that that was perfectly legal and that we even didn't have to pay it back, which we did. But, you know, we don't follow legal counsel, and we got kind of written up for it.
Right.
I'm kind of used to, I was a school teacher, so you
Sure, I understand.
And what do you do in a situation like that when we may write a thing saying, yes, it was perfectly legal to do that. Then we come back with a state audit,
Right.
and you say no.
No, I mean, the general rule is, and you have to look at each fund specifically and how it's set up. As a general matter, it's okay to transfer money from a general fund to a restricted fund, but not the other way around, and that's what happened here. And that's a pretty well-established rule, because the whole definition of the word restricted is that it's restricted for a particular purpose.
Well, and
when it's not used for that purpose, then it really isn't a restricted
And
fund.
I understand that, but, you know, he assured us, and he even quoted case law, that it was perfectly fine to do that. And,
Right.
you know, we went by his recommendation. I was always told, you should listen to your city attorney, and obviously it was a bad choice.
Sure, I wasn't there, I can't say what happened. What I will tell you is that it's not a crime, nobody goes to jail for it. You know what I'm trying to say? It just needs to be fixed. It
Right.
was a problem, it has been fixed now. The good news is it's been fixed, all that money's gone back to the proper fund. So I'm sorry about what might have happened internally.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the board look, the previous board look bad.
It does.
And when we follow what the city attorney said we should do.
But the bottom line is we know what needs to be done
Yeah.
now, and we need to move forward. That's the bottom line here. Yes?
Quick question. We're breaking water and sewer out into two separate funds effective 1/1/2014. They're both proprietary funds. The sewer fund is attached to COPs where that revenue has to be used to pay those back.
You say certificates of participation?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But then the water fund, what I understand is most proprietary funds, utility and electric and water, those are, sewer funds are almost always restricted. But when you talk about restricted funds as far as water is concerned, I guess I'm trying to figure out, because I know a lot of municipalities that do have like their electric and water combined,
Sure.
and they do transfer money out of their, you know, look at Herman and some of those other towns
Absolutely.
that do that, and water isn't. I just want to make sure going forward, because I'm the Greg Shin and Thurman Shin and Company CPAs.
Okay. Well, Chris will give you the details. You know, the problem is, the reason I can't answer a question specifically is the terms of the fund are governed by how the fund is set up. And I don't know the details of it going forward. But if you want, before we head out to talk to him about it, we can give you some advice on that. And I'm glad to see you're committed to doing it right, and that's the main thing. But each case has to be looked at individually on how the fund is actually set up. Sometimes people say they have a restricted fund, but legally it really isn't a restricted fund. So we have to look at that. Other questions? Yes?
Since we're all interested in finances, are we going to get a lump sum bill from you?
Well,
Or an itemized bill?
we will get a bill that makes very clear what it is we did, yes. We'll get you that bill. And as you know, under state law, if you petition me, the city has to pay for the cost. I'm not sure what
I'm
the
not
total.
worried about paying for it, I just like to see what it is, you know, have the board be able to see exactly what it was we got charged for. You know, everybody didn't drive their own car down here from Jeff City every day from PD.
Right. Well, I mean,
Charge a $20 rate.
Chris lives in St. Louis. Chris lives in St. Louis County, so give you an idea. Next question, yes.
My question is, so what does all this mean? We have a lot of wrongdoing being done in the past. So basically, we spent $40,000 and nobody's gonna get nothing up with a scratch on the hand, is that correct?
Well, I mean, we're gonna come back in 90 days and make sure.
But you need to come back like I said,
I'm not a
come back in 90 days, and you still find several things wrong.
I have
That's
a
my
feeling
question.
that after what the city's been through and the media, and I have a feeling people want to fix the problem.
Then
That's
what if they're
but we're
not?
not, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not the
Okay.
attorney general, I don't throw people, you know, I don't.
That's what I'm trying to say, so
Right.
basically, I spent as a taxpayer $40,000 and nobody got nothing but a slap on the wrist.
Well, I'm not interested in punishment,
But I am, though.
I'm interested in fixing problems.
But I am though.
And what I'm confident is, that when I come back in 90 days, I want to see the problems
I
are fixed.
understand what you're saying, but I want those people to have to pay for my taxpayers' money being spent. And what you're saying, there's nobody gonna pay for nothing.
What I'm saying is that I think the problems are going to be fixed. Next question? One more, that's it, okay, yes?
Hey, Tom, this is State Representative T.J. McKenna.
Yeah, thanks for coming, I appreciate that.
Oh, well, your office called and
Yeah,
sent me
we
this.
always let the state representative, state senator, I think your state senate district is vacant, right?
It is.
So we had nobody to call, yeah. Well, at least, I'm pleased you came here, TJ.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you for having us. I just
Yeah.
had a question for the state statutes. I haven't really looked into it, but are there any kind of repercussions on this financial reporting here in the section 105.145 that each political subdivision is supposed to submit a financial report to you? Are there any repercussions for cities like Pevely not doing this? Or is there maybe a different route that maybe something on my end we could change the state statute to?
I think, it's funny you say that, because I was going to talk to some legislators about that, so let's talk about that. Now, there isn't a lot we can do when a report isn't filed. In some cases, in other cases, where reports have to be filed to us, for example, from a court, they can lose jurisdiction. That doesn't happen here. So yeah, let's talk about that when we get back to Jefferson City about how we can improve that. I really appreciate it. Listen, I have to run. It's an honor to serve you. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you next time around in 90 days with everything fixed. Thanks very much.
Nobody's paying for this crap.
Hi.
Nobody's gonna give them a stack of change.